In a life full of challenges and accomplishments, Jimmy Carter stands as one of the figures who changed the course of American and global history. From a president who served his country with dedication, to a humanitarian who devoted his life to service and justice, Carter was a living example that true leadership lies in commitment to values and principles, rather than mere power and position. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the journey of an unforgettable man, exploring how he turned adversity into opportunity and how his legacy continues to inspire people worldwide. Join us as we dive into the life of Jimmy Carter, one of the greatest leaders of the modern era. Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States, held office from 1977 to 1981, a time marked by immense domestic and international turbulence. Although he approached the presidency with deep moral convictions and a desire for reform, many Americans viewed his handling of economic woes and global crises as inadequate. These perceptions significantly contributed to his loss in the 1980 presidential election. However, Carter's post-presidency would come to define his legacy in ways that far outshone his time in the White House. In 1982, alongside his devoted wife Rosalind, he established the Carter Center, an organization devoted to promoting peace, democracy, and public health around the world. His commitment to humanitarian causes earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. Throughout his lifetime, Carter authored more than 30 books, the last of which, Faith, A Journey for All, reflected his deep religious beliefs and unwavering optimism. He ultimately became the longest-living president in U.S. history, passing away in December 2024 at the remarkable age of 100. Born James Earl Carter Jr. on October 1, 1924, in the small rural town of Plains, Georgia, Carter grew up in the segregated South during the Great Depression. His father, James Earl Carter Sr., commonly known as Earl, was a strict but enterprising peanut farmer who owned a modest farm, a warehouse, and a local general store. His mother, Lillian Gordy Carter, was a registered nurse and a compassionate woman with progressive views for her time. In the 1920s, she courageously crossed racial boundaries by offering healthcare advice and support to black women in their community, a gesture that was uncommon and even frowned upon in the deeply segregated society of the South. As the eldest of 4 children, Jimmy displayed discipline and curiosity from a young age. When he was 4 years old, the family relocated to Archery, Georgia. A small, mostly black farming community just a couple of miles from Plains. Life in Archery was simple and tough. Most homes lacked basic modern conveniences like electricity and running water, and mule-drawn wagons were still a common sight. Despite the rural hardships, Jimmy was a focused and responsible child. He started helping at his father's store by the age of 10 and spent countless evenings beside his father, listening intently to radio broadcasts about baseball and politics, 2 topics that deeply shaped his early interests. Religion played a central role in Carter's upbringing. Both his parents were devout Baptists, and the family was active in the Plains Baptist Church. Jimmy regularly attended Sunday school, and his father even taught some of the classes. This religious foundation deeply influenced Carter's worldview and later political values. Though he was educated in an all-white school, Carter developed close friendships with black neighbors and was significantly influenced by black adults who worked in his home, especially his beloved nanny, Annie Mae Hollis, and a farmhand named Jack Clark. These early relationships gave him an unusual sensitivity to racial issues, even if he didn't always act on those principles during his early political career. The Great Depression devastated many farming families across the South, but the Carters managed to thrive. By the end of the 1930s, Carter's father had expanded his operations and employed over 200 workers. In 1941, Jimmy became the first person on his father's side of the family to graduate from high school, a proud achievement that set him on the path toward a broader future. Carter first enrolled in Georgia Southwestern Junior College to study engineering, later transferring to the Georgia Institute of Technology through the Naval ROTC program. His goal was to secure an appointment to the prestigious United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. Despite stiff competition, he was accepted and began his studies in the summer of 1943. Though not physically imposing, he stood just 5 feet 9 inches tall, and somewhat introverted. Carter excelled academically. He graduated in the top 10% of his class in 1946. During his summer leaves, Carter reconnected with Rosalind Smith, a childhood acquaintance and close friend of his sister. Their bond deepened quickly, and they were married in July 1946. The young couple began a life of frequent relocation as Carter embarked on a promising career in the U.S. Navy. He was assigned to submarines, and his work took them from Norfolk, Virginia, to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, where he served as an electronics officer on the USS Pomfret. Later postings included Groton, Connecticut, San Diego, California, and Washington, D.C. In 1952, Carter was selected to work under Admiral Hyman Rickover on the development of the Navy's new nuclear submarine program. Rickover was a famously demanding figure, but he left a lasting impression on Carter. Carter would later say that, besides his own father, no one had a greater influence on his life than Rickover. One of Rickover's probing interview questions, "Did you always do your best?" left such an impression that it inspired the title of Carter's first book, Why Not the Best, published in 1975. Tragedy struck in July 1953 when Carter's father died of pancreatic cancer. The family business fell into disarray, and Carter made the difficult decision to leave the Navy and return to Plains to take over the farm and support his mother. Despite Rosalind's initial reluctance to abandon their Navy life, she ultimately supported the move, and together they rebuilt the farm's operations and began immersing themselves in community affairs. Carter's first public office came in 1955 when he was elected to the Sumter County Board of Education. He later became its chairman, marking the beginning of his long political journey. The 1950s were a time of racial tension and social change in the American South. In 1954, the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in Brown v. Board of Education ordered the desegregation of public schools. In response, civil rights activists increasingly called for an end to all forms of racial discrimination. While many white Southerners resisted these changes, Carter took a more moderate stance. In fact, he was the only white man in his town who refused to join the White Citizens Council, a group formed to oppose integration. However, his progressive ideals often put him at odds with the prevailing political climate. Carter's real break came after the 1962 Supreme Court decision in Baker v. Carr, which mandated the redrawing of voting districts to provide fairer representation. Seeing a chance for reform-minded politicians to gain traction, Carter ran for the Georgia State Senate. Though he initially appeared to lose to local businessman Homer Moore, Carter challenged the results, exposing widespread election fraud. A court overturned the outcome, and Carter was declared the winner. In 1966, Carter set his sights on the governor's mansion. He launched a liberal campaign but was overwhelmed by the resurgence of white resentment in the wake of the civil rights movement. He finished in third place, losing to segregationist Lester Maddox. Undeterred, Carter began planning for a second run in 1970, this time adopting a more conservative tone to appeal to rural white voters. He opposed court-ordered busing, distanced himself from black leaders, and sought endorsements from well-known segregationists, including Maddox himself. Despite the tactical shift during the campaign, once in office Carter returned to his progressive instincts. He delivered an inaugural address that shocked many in Georgia, declaring that the time for racial discrimination is over. As governor, he increased the number of black officials in government, prioritized educational reform, and overhauled the state's bloated bureaucracy, transforming it into a more efficient and responsive system. His independent streak and refusal to play political games alienated many in the Georgia establishment, but it also positioned him as a principled and visionary leader. By the mid-1970s, Carter sensed an opportunity on the national stage. The Watergate scandal had shaken public faith in Washington, and the Democrats were searching for a fresh face. Carter believed that his status as a Washington outsider, coupled with his moderate Southern appeal, made him the right man for the moment. He began laying the groundwork for a presidential run in 1976, one that would change his life and American history forever. In September 1976, Jimmy Carter, the Democratic presidential candidate, delivered a speech before a crowd in Pittsburgh. At that time, Carter was one of 10 candidates vying for the Democratic nomination, and he initially had little name recognition compared to the others. However, in an era when the nation was disillusioned with traditional politicians, Carter's lack of fame worked in his favor. He focused his campaign on core issues such as reducing government corruption, balancing the budget, and increasing government aid for the poor. The central appeal of Carter's campaign was his positioning as an outsider and his personal integrity. His slogans, such as, "I will never lie," and "I will not shy away from any controversial issue," resonated deeply with voters who had grown disillusioned with politicians. Another popular phrase from his campaign was, "a leader for change," which struck a chord with voters who felt betrayed by their government, particularly in the wake of the Watergate scandal. Carter was able to secure the Democratic nomination and went on to face incumbent Republican President Gerald Ford, who had ascended to the presidency after Richard Nixon's resignation following the Watergate scandal. Although Carter started the race with a substantial lead over Ford, he made several missteps that narrowed the gap in the polls. One of the most significant missteps was his response in an interview with Playboy magazine, where he admitted to having committed adultery in my heart and made other hasty comments about sex and infidelity, which alienated many voters. Despite this, the election remained closer than anticipated, but Carter ultimately won and became the 39th President of the United States. Carter took office in 1977, at a time when there was an overwhelming sense of optimism. He enjoyed high approval ratings early in his presidency. After his inauguration speech, he walked from his car to the White House among his supporters, symbolizing his commitment to a new style of leadership. Carter's domestic priorities focused heavily on energy policy. The United States was facing a severe energy crisis, with oil prices soaring due to the OPEC oil embargo of 1973. Carter believed that the nation needed to address its dependency on foreign oil. Although he succeeded in reducing foreign oil consumption by 8% and stockpiling large reserves of oil and natural gas, the Iranian Revolution of 1979 caused oil prices to rise again, leading to long lines at gas stations and overshadowing Carter's achievements. In foreign policy, Carter made human rights a central issue in U.S. relations with other nations. He cut off economic and military aid to countries like Chile, El Salvador, and Nicaragua in protest of human rights abuses by their governments. However, his most notable success in foreign affairs was his mediation in the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt in 1978, which led to a historic peace treaty under which Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula and the two nations officially recognized each other. Despite these significant achievements, Carter's presidency was largely seen as a failure by many, as his relationships with Congress and the media were weak, hindering his ability to pass legislation or effectively communicate his policies. In 1979, Carter delivered a disastrous speech, known as the "Crisis of Confidence" speech, in which he seemed to blame the American people for the country's problems. Several missteps in foreign policy also contributed to the decline in Carter's popularity. His secret negotiations to return the Panama Canal to Panama led many to believe he was a weak leader who gave away the canal without securing sufficient protections for American interests. However, perhaps the most significant crisis that led to Carter's political downfall was the Iranian hostage crisis. In November 1979, Iranian militants stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 66 Americans hostage. Carter's failure to negotiate their release, combined with a botched rescue attempt, made him appear ineffective as a leader. The hostages were held for 444 days, and were released on the day Carter left office in January 1981. In the 1980 election, Carter was challenged by Ronald Reagan, the former governor of California. Reagan ran an effective campaign, focusing on a simple question: are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The answer, for many Americans, was no, and Reagan won in a landslide, with the election seen as a referendum on Carter's failed presidency. As the New York Times put it at the time, on Election Day, Carter was the issue. Despite his presidency being considered unsuccessful, Carter managed to restore his reputation in American history through his humanitarian work. He became known as one of the greatest former presidents the nation has seen. Carter worked tirelessly with the organization Habitat for Humanity, and founded the Carter Center in 1982 to promote human rights and alleviate suffering worldwide. Through the center, he helped develop community healthcare systems in Africa and Latin America and oversaw 125 elections in emerging democracies until August 2024, working to promote peace in the Middle East. His program at the Carter Center nearly eradicated guinea worm disease, with approximately 3.5 million cases in Africa and Asia in 1986, compared to only 13 cases worldwide in 2022. In 2002, Carter was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his decades of work to find peaceful solutions to international conflicts, to advance democracy and human rights, and to promote economic and social development. When he gave his Nobel lecture that same year, he concluded his remarks with words that could be considered his life's mission and a call to action for future generations. "The bonds of our common humanity are stronger than the divisiveness of our fears and prejudices," he said. "God has given us the ability to choose. We can choose to alleviate suffering. We can choose to work together for peace. We can make these changes, and we must." Because of his relentless work to support human rights, equality, and alleviate human suffering before and after his presidency, Carter is remembered as one of the greatest social activists in American history. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter remained together in a marriage that lasted over 77 years, the longest marriage of any presidential couple in U.S. history, celebrating their final anniversary together in July 2023. Rosalind, who had been suffering from Alzheimer's disease, passed away in November of the same year after entering hospice care. In April 2019, Jimmy Carter spoke to the congregation at Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia, where he had taught Sunday school for many years. A devout Christian, Carter was raised in the Southern Baptist faith, but he left the Southern Baptist Convention in 2000 due to disagreements with its stance on women not being allowed to be pastors and the belief that wives should be subservient to their husbands. He and his wife, Rosalind, joined Maranatha Baptist Church in 1981, where they both served as deacons. Carter was a well-known Sunday school teacher, starting his Bible lessons during his time at the Naval Academy and continuing to teach throughout his life. Hundreds of people from all over the country traveled to attend his Sunday school services at Maranatha for decades until he retired from teaching in late 2019. Carter had many interests and hobbies, including fly fishing, woodworking, painting, and supporting the Atlanta Braves baseball team. He was an avid runner until the age of 80 and was a third-generation winemaker. In a 2017 interview with Oprah Winfrey, Carter shared that he and Rosalind sought to find new hobbies to enjoy together, which led them to learn downhill skiing when Carter was 62 and Rosalind was 59. On August 12, 2015, Carter underwent surgery to remove a mass from his liver, and just 8 days later, he revealed that he had been diagnosed with cancer that had spread to other parts of his body. On August 20, 2015, he held a press conference, announcing that doctors had discovered 4 small spots of melanoma on his brain. After undergoing treatment, including targeted radiation, Carter declared himself cancer-free during one of his Sunday school lessons in early December 2015. On March 21, 2019, at the age of 94, Carter became the longest-living U.S. president, surpassing George H. W. Bush's record. However, that year also brought health challenges. In May 2019, he broke his hip in a fall and underwent hip replacement surgery. In October, he had 2 more falls that resulted in stitches above his eye and a minor pelvic fracture. Later in November, he had surgery to relieve pressure on his brain caused by bleeding from the falls. Jimmy Carter passed away at the age of 100 on December 29, 2024, at his home in Plains, Georgia. He had been receiving hospice care for an extended period. At the age of 98, after a series of short hospital stays, Carter began end-of-life care at his home on February 18, 2023. His family initially expected him to live only 5 days to a week, but Carter defied the odds, living for an additional 23 months. 6 days of memorial services for Carter began on January 4, 2025. He was honored with both state and national funerals in Georgia and Washington, D.C., with his body lying in state at the Capitol Rotunda for more than a day. President Joe Biden, who delivered the eulogy at the national funeral, declared January 9 a National Day of Mourning. Carter, a former president and humanitarian, will be buried at his home in Georgia next to his late wife, Rosalind. After his passing, Jimmy Carter was remembered not just as a former U.S. president, but as one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. Throughout his life, he left a clear mark in the field of human rights, working to promote peace and resolve international conflicts. Despite his presidency ending decades ago, his name remained associated with numerous humanitarian initiatives that helped millions around the world. Through the Carter Center, which he founded with his wife, Rosalind, he worked to improve the lives of people in impoverished countries by providing healthcare and education. He also helped build over 4,000 homes for the homeless worldwide through the Habitat for Humanity project. His efforts successfully addressed major issues in areas suffering from extreme poverty, making him a symbol of selflessness and public service. In the realm of peace, Carter was the mastermind behind many historic agreements, such as the Camp David Accords, between Egypt and Israel in 1978, which led to the peace treaty between the two nations. These efforts were among his most notable foreign policy achievements, inspiring many world leaders to pursue dialogue and understanding. Though he has passed, Carter will live on in the hearts of those who believed in his message, and his impact in the field of humanity and peace will resonate around the world for many years to come. After his death, many agreed that he left behind an unforgettable legacy, not only as a president but as an inspiring humanitarian leader. Even after reaching an advanced age, he continued to work tirelessly to improve the conditions of people's lives. History will undoubtedly remember Jimmy Carter as one of the greatest figures of modern times. His name will forever be associated with integrity, faith, and a genuine desire to serve humanity, both in the White House and in the humanitarian projects he launched. Even after leaving this world, his influence will be felt in every corner of American society and globally, continuing to inspire future generations to work toward a better world. As we reflect on the extraordinary life of Jimmy Carter, we see a man who transcended the role of a president, becoming a beacon of hope and change for millions around the world. His commitment to peace, human rights, and the betterment of humanity stood as the pillars of his legacy. Carter showed us that leadership isn't just about holding power, but about making a lasting impact on the lives of others. From his time in the White House to his work with the Carter Center, his dedication never wavered, and his humility remained evident in everything he did. He demonstrated that with compassion, integrity, and perseverance, we can overcome even the toughest challenges. As we say goodbye to this incredible man, his life serves as a reminder that true greatness comes from service to others. Jimmy Carter's journey may have come to an end, but his legacy will continue to inspire and guide us for generations to come. Thank you for watching, and may we all take a lesson from his life, striving to make the world a better place for all.